if I didn't feel like I might possibly have something worth saying, then I wouldn't make anything. I mean, that's at least from where I'm sitting. That's my experience.
Hello, beautiful, creative people, and welcome to the Keep Creating podcast presented by Soundstripe, a podcast created by creators for creators. Every episode, we seek out successful creatives who dedicate their lives to pursuing a creative trade or career. We ask them some questions and soak in all the truth their stories seep. Also, we can package it up and provide more creatives like you the inspiration, education, and tools to grow in your own unique pursuit to keep creating. I'm Joel Porter, and I'm excited for the opportunity to host this show and dialogue with our guests about what creativity looks like in their lives. So, without any more delay, thanks so much for listening, and let's get started. I recently watched a video of Dr. Jordan Peterson, author of The 12 Rules for Life, talk about the psychology of creativity, and in it he said, "It's foolish to be creative, but it is creative people who lead the vanguard into the unknown that is change." I like to believe that all of us who are pursuing something creative and ambitious has an inherent familiarity with this notion. Oftentimes, we understand that creativity is built from a series of feelings and failures, but we feel called to chase it anyway. It's romantic, and oftentimes, it's bigger than ourselves. My guest today is Aaron Sprinkle, a Pacific Northwest-born producer, engineer, and songwriter, and one of the most intentional creators I have ever met. Aaron has been in the music business for over 2 decades. He's produced numerous records for the likes of Anberlin, Pedro The Lion, and Acceptance. For years, he was a prominent producer and engineer at Tooth and Nail Records, a successful label nestled in the heart of downtown Seattle. And the albums he's produced have cumulatively sold millions of copies. Aaron has an absolute need to create, and his insight and expertise into chasing that need is second to none. All right, Aaron, thanks so much for being here today. So, I guess the best place to start here is, how would you describe Aaron Sprinkle?
Ooh, it's a really...
Not to narrow it down here, I guess. How would you describe Aaron Sprinkle as a creative?
Aaron Sprinkle as a creative. Okay, yeah. So that's a little easier. I feel like if you trace it back to when I was a kid, when I first really discovered creativity as a, I don't know, outlet or escape or whatever you want to call it, a way of expressing myself, a way of feeling like I have a place. And I say this a lot, but I really believe that there's things in my life that I just can't not do. Like I have to do them. If I don't even know what if I don't looks like because I've never not done them. So music's always been a big deal to me, but I was very into art, fine art, photography, all that stuff in high school and as a kid. And just general creativity, sort of thinking, imagination-based, I mean, especially when I grew up, there was no internet or anything. So boredom drove you to a lot of incredible places. And this is a reoccurring theme for me too, but it's sort of a combination of not being able to not do creativity and then also constantly chasing a feeling that I got from some other creative thing that inspired me, visually, sonically, whatever, emotion. I'm very emotion based. It's all about feeling. I'm just super into feeling everything, my feelings and how am I feeling and all that stuff. So that's like the barometer for me is my feelings.
Did that creative journey start with discovery? Like, was it a way for you to explain things? Was it a way for you to make sense of the world? Or was it a way for you, as you were just saying, like with the feeling aspect of it, was it a way for you to absorb? Was it introspective or like extrovert?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it is a way to manipulate my feelings to a way that I would like them to be, to a way that I would prefer to feel. And I also think it's just like, what is this all about? What is this world and this place, and where do I fit into it? Where is my identity in that? And in a creative space is where I've really only ever really found my identity, like in a way where I felt like comfortable. You know what I mean? In my own skin. So
speaking a little bit to that, it sounds like a lot of it is introspective for you. It's a lot about like what does art and what does music, it helps me to explain what's going on inside of me. It helps me to relate. Is there any motivation to help others in that as well, or like help them plant the seed for their own introspection?
And that's been a journey too in and of itself. I think one of the main reasons, besides the fact that I felt personally rewarded so much by doing music, but one of the things that I loved about music is the opportunity to potentially connect with people in the way that I was connected with by other people's music. That connection, that camaraderie, that like feeling of being known or heard. I mean, when I would hear a song and go, oh, wow, someone else felt that way or thought that way, not even lyrically necessarily, just knowing that someone was in the space to create whatever song they created made me feel like less alone, which I know is also broken record, sort of reoccurring theme for me, but it's just the truth. And so when I thought, oh, I could do that too, it's a mutually beneficial relationship because I get something out of thinking about connecting with other people and they get something out of me connecting with them. So it's this like circle of that. So yeah, I mean, it's really hand in hand for me. And yeah, again, I'm kind of exploring this at this depth right now out loud with you. So this isn't stuff that I just sit around thinking about.
Right. Yeah. Like hearing you speak, it almost seems like it's like a Venn diagram, where you have one circle that's introspection, and then you have another circle that's, service based, or how can I connect? And then there, where they overlap. Yeah. There's this like perfect little zone.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be completely honest, one of those sections of that diagram would be personal validation, personal worth, value. I mean, everybody wants to feel like they matter or mean something, and everybody tries to figure out a way to do that. And my brain wiring is the only one I've ever experienced, but that's a huge drive for me, is to be able to feel like I have something worth saying and that other people can share that and be like, oh yeah, I think you do too, The ego thing is so interesting in the creative space because if I didn't feel like I might possibly have something worth saying, then I wouldn't make anything. I mean, that's at least where I'm sitting. That's my experience.
So then is the focus that you put on the search for something worth saying?
Yeah, I mean, that's really complicated too, because sometimes I'm like, well, I want to have something worth saying because I want to be cool.
Okay.
And then sometimes I want to have something that's worth saying because I want people to think I'm as deep and smart as that person that they're referencing or talking about. And then sometimes I just don't have any other way to say what I'm trying to say. There's something so big, something I'm feeling that's so huge, and the only way I can express it is through this. Or the only way I can even like work through it is through this.
In the early stages of your journey, were there any like pivotal choices that you had to make in order to like dedicate yourself to the pursuit of creativity? Like any specific ones that come to mind?
Yeah, there was a community college near Seattle that had like a recording program that was, in my circles of friends, a fairly well-known thing. It was kind of one of the only options at the time. I graduated from high school in 1992, so around then it was like, I think maybe the Art Institute had something, but that was super expensive. And I got this teeny little scholarship and some money from my grandpa, and I enrolled in that recording program. And in the summer between graduating from high school, when that recording program started, I had met someone that had a studio in this building that this church that my dad worked at met in, this huge old high school. There was a studio in there as well. And he had given me the keys to the studio and said I could just use it and really learn in there. And he was a resource and he taught me a lot, but it was really him allowing me to have space in there that was the thing. And I remember about a week and a half into the school year of this college that I started going to in this recording program, I was sitting in this class. It was like a music business class. And I was sitting there listening to this guy, and I just kept looking at the keys on my key ring. And I just got up and walked out, and I never went back. I just went to that studio and I just started recording music. I just started writing songs and finding people. And I remember I was in one of the classes in that program was a music theory class too. And I had no music training whatsoever. And I remember like, now I kind of wish I could take a music theory class like that. I think it would be really fun.
Sure, yeah.
But at the time I was just like, this is so confusing and I don't want to play this stupid thing. And this is so weird. And I just want to write songs and make music. I don't want to know why. I was 18 or whatever, so.
There's a lot to pick out of that, though. I mean, the fact that you had the intuition to just go and do it, to just get up and go and practice.
I literally left, like, in the middle of a school day. Like, I was like, I'm out. This is stupid.
This is not worth it.
This is not for me. And it's funny because my guidance counselor in high school, we were like friends. Like she was really cool. And I remember like that meeting that you had like to talk about college. Like we sat down and she's like, so you're not going to college, right? And I was like, no. And she's like, okay, cool. She's like, college is not where you need to be. You're going to be just fine. And I was like, okay. And then after that, I decided to do this college thing because I felt like I had to.
Mm-hmm.
So that was pivotal. There's a bunch of other ones I can think of, but it was the risk, the thing of like, I'm going to take this risk. I mean, I was offered a job at my high school teaching computers at 18. The principal like begged me to stay. And I was like, I'm out of here. I'm doing music or whatever, And so, yeah, it's really the risk. Just making a choice that maybe doesn't on paper look like the right choice. Mm-hmm. But you got to go with your gut.
Do you think that's something that over time, it's like a tool that gets sharpened?
Yes, okay. Absolutely. You get more comfortable and secure. And it's because it can be really scary to say, that's not right. Especially like if you're in a room with a bunch of people and we're all working on a song together and you know that it's not right. And sometimes that means scrapping the song or starting completely over or whatever. It can be really scary to say something. But what's scarier is keeping going and then working on something that you just are like, why am I doing this? This sucks. I hate this. That's way worse than being honest. But that took me a really long time. I was by nature a non-confrontational person, and not just with other people, but with myself. I was like, let's do the most pain avoidance or the most whatever avoidance
easiest
possible.
Pathway forward. Yep.
Yeah. And now, being older and going through a lot of personal pain and stuff too, I kind of welcome situations to feel uncomfortable. I kind of I'm maybe even looking for them because the results are way more exciting when you're in those kind of situations. Getting to be like, nope, that's shit. Let's do that again. Usually ends up being awesome. Even if it's not what you think is going to happen, something more exciting happens when you do that. But yeah, definitely sharpen. And not just sharpen from a sense of bravery, But you get better at it. You get better at hearing your instincts the more you listen to them or identifying them quicker. What is your gut saying? As a producer, that was my primary job for 25 years, is producing records. And that's literally what I was getting paid to do. If you like got it, whittled it all the way down to like its really, really primary basic thing, I was getting paid to be like, what does your gut think? Is this good or not good? That's it. Which is super weird to think about.
So how did you put yourself in situations outside of being a producer that helped you do that? Or was it just in the arena all the time?
Well, part of it is continuing to make my own music. That was essential because if I, again, in retrospect, in hindsight, looking back and kind of dissecting what I was looking at when I was sitting in that seat as a producer, I've gotten some clarity on that just by having conversations like this with people. So it was partly, what would I do if this was my band or record? And the only way I could know that is if I was making records. And then the other part of it was from the perspective of a fan of music. I had to keep that fan perspective. What do I want to? If this was a record that I was trying out, there used to be these things called listening stations at record stores where you would buy music. This is for the kids. And if you were like listening on a listening station, which if you find a record store with listening stations, they're freaking awesome. They still exist. But you can like try out music. And what would I want to hear? What would, as a fan of music, what would excite me and make me feel that feeling that I want to get from that new record or that new song or that new band? So yeah, being an artist myself was essential to being able to even begin to tell people what I thought they should do. Otherwise, it's like, why do I even have a right to tell you what to do if I'm not doing it myself?
Right.
And I also started there, I got signed young and was on the other side of the glass, as they like to say. I worked with producers that taught me. I mean, the first couple of producers I worked with don't even know how much they taught me because I was just watching everything they did like a hawk and, how to arrange a song so that it makes sense or, all that kind of stuff I learned just from being on the other side of it and wanting my music to work for other people.
Hey friends, I wanted to take a brief moment to talk about the music on this episode because I'd be remiss if I didn't mention our amazing artists. You can actually license today's song by Neon Beaches, one of Aaron Sprinkle's projects, by simply heading to soundstripe.com/keepcreating. In fact, we've got a custom playlist of all the songs we use on our podcast, and we just know that they're going to inspire you. All right, enough from me. Let's get back to it. So in order to keep your tools sharp, in order to unlock some of your creativity, are there any practices or habits or rituals that you go through before you get into this creative space?
Yeah, definitely. And that's changed over the years. And mostly what's changed is just that I'm actually more intentional about that stuff than I used to be. I used to just be so whatever's happening today is what's happening today. And now I'm a little more into the art and craft of being intentional about those things. It's just kind of fun to me. And it also makes my life easier and more fun if I'm able to sort of identify what works and what doesn't work. So for me, because of the way I am wired, a couple things, really big things that I've learned just in the last 5-ish years is I work really well really early in the morning.
How early?
I get up at 5 in the morning. And if I can get the bulk of my really creative work done before lunch, I'm going to have a way better day. There's actually some really great writing on creativity in general. Donald Miller has some stuff about this and different people that I've barely read, to be honest. I'm usually I read the headline and I'm like, I'm doing it. And I just go do it. But you're basically done making decisions by a certain time of day, whether you know it or not, your capacity to be able to really do it. And then there's another thing about just sort of being, the more awake you are, the worse you are at making those gut level instinctual decisions. So I try to work early. And then the other thing that's been the biggest thing, and even to the point where I had a spiel that I would give bands in the studio relating to this, where I would be like, look, if I'm not feeling it, I'm not pushing through. So like I would tell bands, like, if we're working and then all of a sudden I'm watching YouTube videos for an hour, I'm doing that on purpose. And you're just going to have to deal with it. Like, because I can't just manufacture this state of creativity and make anything worth listening to come out of it. So I've gotten more efficient at that, though. So I've been able to figure out little ways that, like, man, if I'm feeling really not sweet, I know some things that'll reset me pretty quickly. And one of them is gasp, physical activity, which is something I never used to do either, but now I'm like really obsessed with. But just like getting your body out of the space that you're in and into a almost meditative space of physical activity, like where you're not really thinking about much, but just getting yourself out, out, somewhere else, walking your dog, something like that. Really a big deal. Because there's certain things that I don't really watch YouTube videos anymore because that actually didn't reset me as quickly. I would just get lost in that, and then I would just feel like lethargic and stupid and like. So now I'm more about like intentionally resetting and getting back, and I can get back pretty quick sometimes. And then sometimes, this is again those gut things that are you're just afraid. But sometimes I'm like working in the morning and I don't like anything I'm doing, and I just get this feeling in my gut like you're not gonna do anything today worth doing. So go do some other stuff that actually is like gonna benefit your or other people's lives today instead of sitting around trying to make something good happen. And then revisiting is a huge thing for me too. So like specifically with the composing that I do with Soundstripe, my workflow is to kind of puke out a start of a song really fast, like super early in the morning. Like I've started 3 or 4 songs in one day before, easily. Like I record a little bit, but then I'll just put them away and intentionally not listen to them again for like 2 days. Intentionally forgetting what they were. Like I couldn't even sing them back to you so that I can go back and almost produce them. I can hear them for the first time, even though I made them. And then I can go, oh, that is stupid. Why would you go to that chord there? You need to fix that. Or really, I'm hearing this. I can work so much faster if I do it like that. So it's crazy.
How did you get to a point where you could, I think there's a ton to unpack here. How did you get to a point where you could be in the moment creating and not be editing and not be, judgmental about anything that you've done? Like, is that a straightforward mindset that you have coming into it?
Yeah, I feel like I have a little bit of like weird dual stuff happening in my brain, and I'm sort of embracing that. So I am very ADD, like what you would think of as ADD. And so I embrace my boredom. So if I'm working on something and I start to get bored with it, I let myself get bored with it and put it away. So it's a way of detaching. So I'm like, okay, I knew I liked that a few minutes ago. So I'm going to lay it down. Right now I'm bored with it, and I really just don't even care about it at all. So I'm just going to lay it down and then see tomorrow. And so sometimes I'll lay something down and the opposite will happen. I'm like, this is the sickest thing that I have ever made. Oh my gosh, everyone is going to just be so blown away when they hear this. And then the next day when I open it up, I'm like, what was I thinking? That is garbage. And then the other thing happens all the time where I'm like meh about something. And the next time I'm like, ooh, if I did that there, this whole thing could be so cool. So I guess if I really want to be honest, it's all an exercise in keeping myself like surprised and entertained by all of it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like keeping myself from being bored.
Yeah.
Is all it is.
And it gives you fresh eyes and it lets you be objective. I mean, that's...
But see, the other side of me is once I am feeling fairly confident that what's happening is worth finishing, I can put my nose to the grindstone and I can get a crazy amount of work done in a really short amount of time.
Sure.
Like, take something that where I'm like, okay, that's actually really cool the next day. And then I'm like, drums, bass, guitar, top line, blah, 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 all in one day. Done.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next day I listen to it and go, tweak 4 more things, send it off.
Right. Because you're still showing up every day.
Yeah,
you're showing
absolutely.
Up. It's not
100%. No. I'm not checking out. I can't check out. Like if I'm about to go on a trip, I have this little guitar that's so funny, but it's awesome. I love it so much. It's called a Gitalele. Have you ever seen those?
I've never seen one.
It's like Yamaha makes it, and I think they're $100, but it's a half scale nylon string acoustic guitar. So it's A. But it's this teeny little. It's so fun to play. It's just the easiest thing to play, and I've written like so many songs on that thing. And I'm not taking a rig with me and trying to really work on a trip like that, but I will sit there and, I have whole hypothetical records that I've written in voice memos on trips with that thing, where I could probably go back and listen to those voice memos and get 10 things and write a record from it. So yeah, I can't, like I said, I can't not do it. Mm-hmm. So like the thought of like literally unplugging my brain. I mean, I have before for a day or two at a time, but then I'm just like reading about something or Googling something that has to do with something, because I can't not at least be flexing that a little bit.
Right. What do you think the biggest challenges for creatives are today? In today's world, in today's culture, what do you think is the most difficult thing that they have to navigate? And do you have any insight onto how to navigate that?
I mean, I think just the amount of people that are creatives and think they're creatives, and I'm not saying that in a ironic way. I think if you think you are. But there's just the visibility of creatives is just so huge, which in one way can be difficult, but in another way I think it's just beautiful and incredible and amazing. I love it. I think it's so cool. But finding your kind of voice in that sea, in that crowd, can be overwhelming feeling.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think that creatives should do in order to start trying to find that voice? Do you think that there's a way to find it through copying or mimicking and then, iterating off of that until...
I think that that's the only way you can find it.
Okay.
I think that being unabashedly, directly able to be super inspired by something and completely rip it off and then make it you is the only way you're going to find who you are. That's what everyone that you like did to get where they are. I actually figured this out pretty early on for me in my career. My favorite thing to do is take two things that are very specific that I love and put them together in a way that I haven't heard before. So I'm very much like wearing my influences on my sleeve, but I'm kind of mashing these two things together and trying to make like a hybrid feeling. It's not even that I'm trying to make a new feeling. I'm trying to make a hybrid of two feelings. And I noticed it because I realized I was doing it. It wasn't like I want to do it, so I'm going to do it. I was like, oh, that's what I'm doing. But I mean, the whole thing about like being unoriginal or whatever, I think the only time you're going to really run into that is if you're afraid to expand what you're emulating. If you're like, I'm good at emulating this one thing and I'm never going to move outside of that. So being one note is definitely a way that you can sabotage yourself, in my opinion. Being like, well, I don't do that. I think I don't do that is the worst thing you can say to yourself. And I remember like working on records with people as a producer where if we were doing something and I had an idea and they would be like, oh, that's just not something we do, I would be like, oh, I'm done. This whole record is basically over for me. I will finish it and it will be fine, but I don't really care about it anymore. Like if I'm honest with myself, that's how I felt inside. It was just crushing. It was like, well, then what are we doing here?
Took away all the exploration.
Yeah, let's find something here, you know? So being willing to go outside of what you believe your box is a huge way to find your own voice, and not being afraid to copy people. And I don't mean literally rip people off. I mean, some of my favorite newer artists, and when I say newer, I mean at any point in my life, are ones that were just blatantly wearing their influences on their sleeve. And now I don't even really think about that anymore. When I first heard them, I thought, oh, that they're really obviously into this other thing that I like. And now they're just their own thing. I just don't think, I think we as creatives think about that kind of stuff and care about that stuff way more than people think about that stuff or care about that stuff.
Well, yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think people like things that are familiar anyways. And
of course, classicism is a huge part of why people like stuff. And also people like or don't like. That's it. They're not going to go, man, I would really love that song if the snare didn't sound like blah, 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 or what. You know, they just are like, I love that, or whatever. That's it.
What advice would you give your younger self at the beginning of your career?
To make less decisions out of fear. Don't let fear make you make any decisions. All of the things that I regret, all of the choices I've made in my life, I made out of fear. And some of them are like even stupid fear of not being safe enough or whatever, you know, or fear of pain. Pain's not something to be avoided. And I'm not talking about in a masochistic way, you know, like hurting yourself, but like pain is how we grow. And like, that's important. But fear of being rejected is such a huge part of what I really, honestly, for real, feel like a late bloomer in general. If I would describe myself as a late bloomer in almost every aspect of my life. Because I'm 45 and I still am like, oh, really? That's what it is? Like I'm still figuring. And I'm like, dang it, if I only would have known that like 20 years ago. And it's so much of that's fear of just people knowing who I really am or whatever. Don't be afraid of that. Like, be you. And fortunately, that's one of the most beautiful things about, as an old guy, seeing younger generations, that people are just less and less afraid of being who they are. And I think that's just freaking awesome. The other thing that fear, and actually kind of a culture that I grew up in, especially in the Seattle area in the early 90s, was just being afraid to collaborate, being afraid to, like, there was this whole sense of like, you have to do something and you have to be able to take all the credit for it. And that's just kind of bullshit. You know, like people should be like, let's share the love. Let's do this together. Let's make this together. Let's experience this together. You can learn more. You can spread out all the things, you know, and collaborating is so important. And I think doing stuff on your own is really important too. I don't think you should just collaborate. But I was like afraid of real collaboration. I was afraid that it was like a sellout almost. It was like, it was kind of actually in the culture I grew up in. Like, especially if like you were in a band and somebody that wasn't in your band helped you on something, then that was like, oh, you're a sellout. Or you couldn't do that unless they helped you or whatever. And just like, the most successful people in the world surround themselves with the most help. And that's another huge thing.
Is there a parable or a children's tale that you relate with more than others? Or do you have a fictional character or someone that you like aspire to be or see a lot of yourself in? This is a fun one.
So my favorite children's book, like little kid children's book, not like cool Chronicles of Narnia thing, was The Tawny Scrawny Lion. It's a golden book about this lion that eats soup with this rabbit It's this rabbit. He's trying to go eat the rabbit, but the rabbit invites him over to his house instead, and he ends up eating soup with him. And it's just the best. It's the best. Because he's like, it's the sweetest. I both of my boys, I basically forced them for that to be their favorite book too. But check it out. It's a golden book. You know those books with the golden spines?
The golden spine,
That's one of my favorite ones. As far as a fictional character that I aspire to be.
Or like relate with.
Relate with. I always related with Edmund in the Chronicles of Narnia. Yeah. Which is not necessarily the best thing to say about yourself, but I did always really relate.
He's got a redemption story.
Oh, big time. Yeah.
2 more.
Yep.
What is a skill that you wish you were extremely proficient at, and why?
A skill that I wish I was extremely proficient at is one that I'm better at now than I used to be, but I wish I knew then what I know now, which is just time management in general. And it's not just time management from like, you got to get this done here, but it's splitting my time up into ways that allow me to be more effective and more efficient. Like knowing my strengths and weaknesses and knowing how to split my time up in a way that I can like get up at noon and be like, stand up at noon and be like, oh, I just did an entire day's worth of work by noon. Because I've kind of started to figure that out. But yeah, time management is huge. And it's one of those things as creatives, or at least for me as a creative, I would just be like, whatever, that's stupid. I'm just making cool stuff. I'm a creative. I'm an artist. Time management's for suits or whatever. But it really allows me to be more creative if I'm good at time management. It allows me to be in that sweet spot more often and to realize my visions in a more efficient way.
Is there anything, like a specific question that you like being asked that I didn't ask you?
I think people should know that having the last name Sprinkle sucked really bad when I was a kid, but as an adult has been awesome. Like, as a kid, I got made fun of literally daily for my last name. And then as soon as I was sort of like an adult, like kind of professional adult, it was the best thing ever because everybody remembered it.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of interesting.
There are pros and cons to
and I think people might be afraid to ask me, do you ever hate that your last name is Sprinkle?
So no, not anymore.
No, I used to, but not anymore.
Well, Aaron, thanks so much for coming on to the podcast. Tons and tons of value. Thank you for letting us pick your brain and dive into some of your expertise. Make sure to check out Aaron's music on Spotify and iTunes and wherever you can hear music. It's also on soundstripe.com. Yeah. Once again, thanks so much for being here.
It was so fun.
So
Anytime.
Great. I want to thank Aaron again for being on the show, and I want to thank you all for spending your time with us. And I hope you soaked up every bit of wisdom Aaron had to share. Make sure to subscribe to our show so you don't miss future episodes, and help us build a healthy and collaborative community of creators by sharing this with someone who could use some words of inspiration today. And lastly, I want to thank our team here at Soundstripe for making the show possible. If you don't know who we are, Soundstripe is a subscription-based music licensing company that provides unlimited music to subscribers for all video and creative needs. If you need music for your podcast, your YouTube channel, your vlog, radio show, film, anything, go to soundstripe.com to learn more about our amazing library of music and sound effects. We also create and curate a ton of inspirational and educational material that is featured on our blog and our digital magazine. Both can be found on our website. With everything we do, our mission is to keep creatives creating. So once again, thank you all for joining us this week. Hope you tune in with us next time. And remember, no matter what, keep creating.